Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Africam show, brought to you by explore.org. My name is Russell Gerber, and with you for the next half an hour to enjoy the wonderful images coming from our live cameras around the country here in South Africa. Wonderful to have you with us, and as always it is of course a live and interactive show, so we never know what's going to come down. Kicking off the show today at Tembe with a beautiful elephant bull just coming towards the camera as we speak. As always, folks, if you have any questions, anything on your mind that you'd like to send our way, please feel free to do so during the show. And also, after the show today, I will be around on the Africam community chat on the explore.org website, where I'll answer a few of your questions for about half an hour or so. So please do jump on there if there's anything we don't quite get to during the show today. And as always, we've got a couple of great highlights lined up for you that we'll be going through in the duration of the show. I'm sure many of you managed to see some great things on the cameras over the last weekend. We always do have special things around. It's easy to forget that we're watching one of Africa's most iconic species, and we see them so often this time of year on the cameras. I feel like we're almost spoiled with the amount of elephant visitors we get. And this fellow has decided to have a little mud bath. Give himself a little cool down, perhaps. And of course, many of you will know too that this kind of mud bath also helps to alleviate some of the parasitic issues that many of the large megafauna of Africa have to deal with. Things from fleas to ticks, biting insects, etc. What it does is it helps to cover them up in that mud, and as it dries off in the heat, that mud will eventually suffocate those parasites, and the elephants will often utilize various rubbing posts to get them off. So a pretty effective way to get rid of parasites. And Therese Arthur says, looks like a lovely day. It does indeed, Therese. It's been fairly cool over the last few days, with what looks like a very mild cold front that has gone through the country. And things are starting to warm up in the bush again. Often during October we get some pretty high temperatures. And this heat really important in eventually creating the conditions for the big summer rainfall that is the usual in these areas. Look at this fellow living his best life. Great mud spa at Tembe. Now Laura Miller asks, is his trunk broken? Lisa White saying the same. He's got a nasty cut on his trunk. Yeah, I was looking at that as he was coming towards the camera, and it looks as though he certainly does have a cut there. Now, I don't know exactly what happened to him. That kind of injury does unfortunately looks like potentially a snare. Now, we've spoken about snares on the show in the past, and some of our Africam for Good shows where poachers come into these areas and they'll put snares down, often without targeting specific animals. They'll be going for certain things, mainly for the bushmeat trade. But those kinds of snares are not very selective, and it can end up catching just about any animal, even the trunk of an elephant. And the way that it looks, it does look like it may well have potentially been something like that. It could also have been a nasty thorn or branch when it was a younger elephant that caused that injury. But as I say, from my experience, that does look more like what could potentially be a snare injury. What was amazing about elephants is, and so many other animals to be fair, but elephants in particular are so resilient and tough. And those wounds can and do heal, and you can carry on with life without too much of a handicap. In this particular instance, I imagine it would have been very painful when it did happen, but he seems a very happy chappy now. And Amber Hicks, Terry Perino all also spotted that scar on the trunk. So well spotted out there, folks. But these things do happen from time to time. I always find it quite amazing to see how well they do recover from these sorts of things and can go on with their lives with really little to no impact. As I said, some speculation on what might have happened. I'm not sure exactly. So if anyone out there does have further information, do let us know in the comments. But he looks pretty happy now, I will say that for sure. Some of you mentioned, could it have been a crocodile? It's unlikely that a crocodile would leave that sort of scar. It's also very uncommon for crocodiles to go for even young elephants. They know how potentially dangerous that can be. But it does lead us into our quiz question for the day. So if you guys are keen on taking part, a little quiz question for today is: how long do Nile crocodiles live? How long do Nile crocodiles live? Now, there's a few different answers out there in the world, but for the sake of continuity, we're going to go with my answer. But I will let you know what that is at the end of the show, and do feel free to give us your thoughts and comments on that during the show. What a lovely, peaceful sight, though. And Christy mentions that Ellie has been around for a while. He seems to do well. Yeah, Christy, thank you for spotting that and for letting us know. I have also seen this chap in the past before. It's amazing that they can survive these kinds of things and get on with it, as I mentioned. But he is having a grand old time by the waterhole at Tembe. A couple of clouds around, suggesting we might be getting the first taste of potential build-up towards rain. So exciting times ahead for the season. Looks like he's kneeling down, having a good scratch. I just love watching them. They always seem so happy in the water like that. But let's head on over to Katmai. It looks like we've got, well, we certainly had a couple of giraffe around. There we go. Thank you, madam, for cooperating. Here we have what looks to be a beautiful adult female giraffe. With her skinny little ossicones on the top of her head. And of course, the lovely black tufts of hair. The male's ossicones significantly thicker. Yeah, that's one of the easiest ways to tell them apart from their female counterparts. Wanda Norris asks, are there any animals that you get tired of watching? Wanda, no, not really. I can always find something interesting in all the animals we see. You may be unsurprised to hear that I do in fact go on vacation to the bush as well as work in the bush as a safari guide, and of course have the privilege of chatting with all of you on the live cameras staring at the bush. So yeah, I really do enjoy it. It's a great privilege to be able to love what I do. Thank you for your comments. And Amy Nicole Clodfelter Morgan, she's joined us for the first time today. She says she's so enjoying it. Thank you, Amy. Very glad to hear that. Me too. It's always a pleasure watching a giraffe having its late afternoon lunch. I mentioned last week too, the giraffes do pretty well compared to many of the other species when it comes to the dry season. Of course, them being so tall, they don't have much competition in the way of reaching nutrition and the leaves at the top of these shrubs and trees, which of course many of the other antelope species do not have that advantage. But certainly one of Africa's most beautiful animals, and so peaceful. And last week we chatted about the sounds that giraffe make. And for the most part, they are very silent animals, very relaxed animals. There has been some recent research showing that they do indeed hum to each other at night. Unfortunately, at frequencies that we can't hear, but apparently that is the case, which I think is quite exciting. And while she's having her afternoon lunch, why don't we dive into our first highlight video of the day. And this has been quite popular with many of you. Of course, the hyena cubs. We have our two older cubs and the two younger cubs. You can see the two younger cubs clearly much smaller than the older, but they also have that very dark fur color, which is synonymous with young hyena cubs, as you would expect, of course. They are remarkably playful. And these young cubs, the darker ones, we've seen have just started getting a little braver, which is pretty typical around this age, where they'll start to venture out a little bit more from the den, getting the first smells and first sight of a whole new world outside the den, with plenty of anxiety. If there's anything that makes them nervous, quickly run back to mom. But it's so nice to be able to watch them develop into young cubs, and of course these older cubs, soon to be young sub-adults. And these are of course spotted hyena. Many of you commented that you've seen brown hyena on the cameras, which is another species we get in the area. The spotted version, however, is certainly the more commonly seen. But an amazing clip from the beautiful hyena den. And back live now. Looks like we've crossed over to Tau, where our crocodiles are on the prowl. So don't forget, this is the subject of our quiz today. How long do Nile crocodiles live on average? And Lisa White, she asks, I understand giraffes have the longest tails. Is that true? Lisa, I'm not sure if they have the longest tail in the animal kingdom. They do have very long tails. To give you an idea, a tail on a male giraffe can be up to 1.5 meters, which is just incredible. Every time I even think of that figure, it just blows my mind. Generally, though, the tail would be around about 1 meter long. But yes, they do have incredibly long tails, very handy in swatting away various biting insects. Looks like a little three-banded plover as well. And then Kathy asks, when are baby giraffes born? Kathy from Colorado, thank you for your question. And baby giraffes are pretty much born any time of year, Kathy. There's no real time that they will try to give birth. The reason for that being what we were chatting about earlier, that of course they don't have too much issue when it comes to loss of food unless there is a very severe drought. And so they don't have too much seasonal pressure on when they do need to have babies. So I hope that answers your question. These crocodiles still snacking away here on a carcass that was by the water. And actually, while we're looking at it, let's have a look at the highlights from the weekend. There you can see a little disagreement on who's going to get the biggest pieces. But let's have a little look at that highlight from the weekend. Now this one was a little different, but really, really cool to see, and not something we witness often. And it was very exciting to see on the camera, but this was really just a show of dominance between individuals. Some very large crocodiles. Now, it's difficult for me to tell if that's a male or a female. Likely to be male. And the black-winged stilt just in front of it there. But crocodiles fighting over space is, of course, pretty common this time of year as the water starts to dry up. and keeping your little patch of water protected so that you can feast on the various fish species that are now struggling to find space in the water of their own. Well, if you can keep competitors away, it always gives you an edge. In the wild, the vast majority of conflict. Look at that power and speed, it's just unbelievable. And a little hiss right afterwards. Now this was taken at Tau. Of course, one of our cameras. That's where we've gone back to now live. So animals will generally fight over resources, and those resources being food, of course territory, and another one, of course, is females. Sometimes males, or at the very least, to mate over the potential, or fight over a potential mate. And we've gone back to Tembe now. Looks like we've got two youngish elephant bulls having a little play fight by the waterhole. Looks like our scarred trunk fellow is having a little tussle with another young bull. Now, this is all part of learning, part of training in life for young elephant bulls. As they get older, of course, their potential for mating with females in estrus gets a little higher. But you've got to do a lot of practicing and training along the way. That certainly looks like what these two are up to right now. Now you'll notice our scarred elephant bull, one on the right hand side of your picture with the injury on its trunk, also seems to be missing a tusk on the left hand side. Now the reason for that is also unknown. It could be a number of things. It could have broken off. They do utilize their tusks for fighting, for feeding. But it could also just have been a genetic reason. You simply didn't get one growing on that side, which is also possible. If it did break off, it will keep growing, and it might emerge as he gets older. As many of you have mentioned, he's doing quite well, so we might be able to keep an eye on that and see how long it takes if he does have a little tusk that emerges from the left-hand side. Really fun to watch them interacting with each other. Elephants are always so busy. Another reason why I just love watching them. It's hard to get tired of watching them. And we've got a lovely new camera that's up and running, and I'm sure many of you have visited there whilst browsing the Africam cameras. But we've got some beautiful sightings and views of the flamingos at Camphors Dam. Let's go over to Camphors now and have a look. And there you have the gorgeous, gorgeous lesser flamingos. Now they can be quite noisy. We seem to be losing a little bit of sound at campers as well. But a really cool sight of all of them all together. Now we have chatted about that in the past, but at campers we do also have the greater flamingos, but for the most part they are lesser. And the juveniles tend to be a slightly lighter color, which is what we saw in our previous site there. But yeah, we had a bit of picture breakup, so we've just crossed back over to TMB. As you can see, a couple of clouds around, and the hint of the potential rain on its way for the summer season. Of course, we're always hopeful for good rain. You never know when a drought cycle is going to come. We had pretty good rain beginning of this year, so I hope we get some more. While things are a little quiet, let's have a look at our last little clip of the day. Also a highlight taken from a few days ago. And another one of crocodiles, which have really been the focus for today. Now, this was a carcass by the waterhole. And I was just discussing with some of our colleagues, we're not sure where the carcass came from. If any of you do know, please do give us a comment and give us a shout out. But you'll see crocodiles will often bring carcasses by the edge of the water, animals that may have either succumbed to the elements, or of course being preyed upon and left behind by others. But there you see that amazing roll of the crocodile, often referred to as the death roll. Now, that roll is generally used in actually feeding. They'll actually grab on to a piece of the prey that they're feeding on, and they'll then spin to tear a piece off. It also can be utilized, that roll, to actually bring the animal down and drown them, which is often the way the crocodiles will subdue their prey. But really cool to see the good world famous crocodile death roll in action. And it's so awesome to have these cameras at night. Of course, these are infrared cameras with very little ambient light actually on the waterhole at this time, so we have very little impact on the animals, and therefore get to see very much natural behavior. And we've crossed back live now to our baby rhinos, all indoors, having a little snack, someone having a little nap near the front of the camera. You can see everybody enjoying being inside for the time being. Our careful rhinos calves all looking happy and fat and full. They are such characters. If you're keen on constant entertainment, do keep your eyes on the careful rhinos cameras. They're always busy and always making me laugh as well. But that's about it in terms of time for the show today, folks. So we got to get into our answers for our quiz. So let's see what we got here. We've got Cindy 65, Wanda 75, Thomas 60, Susan 50, Susie Q 80, looks like Geert or Geert NL 60, And we've even got 100 years, many of you around 50. So as you can see, it's a little all over the show. And there's quite a lot of contention about the actual answer, but the majority of your research will show you that most crocodiles, Nile crocodiles in this instance, will live to around 60 years old in the wild, but up to 80 years in captivity has been recorded, and then of course with some anomalies of around over 100 years, which I don't think has been really proven as far as I know. But thank you so much for taking part. We will go with a round 60 years. So for those of you who got that right, well played. But unfortunately, folks, that's all we have time for on the show today. Such a pleasure spending time with you all for the last half an hour, checking out what's going on the live cams. Thank you for your questions and your interaction. And we'll be back again, same time next week for the Africam show. In the meantime, keep your eye on the cameras, and if you do want to check me out on social media, you'll find me at Russ the Ranger on Instagram. And also after the show today, of course, as I mentioned, I'll be on the Africam chat, on the community chat group at explore.org for a little after show. So if you'd like to join me there, please do feel free. But unfortunately, that's all for today, folks. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you again next week. Same time, same place. Cheers for now.